Hello everyone, good morning and welcome to Mortgage News Live in association with MPowered Mortgages. If this is your first time joining us or your 21st, you're very welcome. Lovely to have you with us. Of course, if you're watching live, remember you can ask questions to me and the panel using the comment function on the screen. If you're listening back on YouTube or Spotify, of course, just stay tuned to hear how our experts panel does today. But we've got a really good topic for you today. It's one of the most searched for questions on Mortgage Brain. It is the question of mortgages for foreign nationals. Now, the reason we're talking about this, of course, is that the dream of home ownership is universal. And many of the 10.7 million foreign-born people living in the UK who've chosen to make their home here, well, for them, making a home here means owning a home here. But how do they do it? That's what we're going to be looking at today. Now, this is not a small market. The last census a few years ago found that 16% of the UK population were born overseas. So we're talking about a big pool of potential customers. But how does the mortgage sector and mortgage brokers find the right mortgage for these foreign-born people who want to buy a property here in the UK? That's what we're going to be looking at today. The good news, of course, is that most lenders will lend to foreign nationals. But, and it is but, there are sometimes some stricter criteria, some different rules that foreign nationals have to meet in order to get a mortgage compared to a UK citizen or someone who's lived here their whole life. So with me to kind of unpack this tricky question and look at those differences, I've got an expert panel. We've got Rachel Geddes, who's the Managing Director of Global Mortgage Management. Hello, Rachel. Good morning.
Hey, Jack. How are you?
I'm very well. Good to see you. Thank you for joining us today. Rachel, can you tell us a little bit more about Global Mortgage Management?
Yes, so I started off in the mortgage industry just over 19 years ago, and I set up the business 9 years ago now. So we are based in the City of London. We're quite a bespoke brokerage dealing with more of the complex specialty clients that London brings with it. And foreign nationals is a great topic for us because I'm afraid over 60% of our clients are based or being born overseas.
Yes, well, that makes sense being based in London. Something like 40% of the population in London was born overseas. So it absolutely makes sense. This is a large market for you and a large market for many brokers across the UK. We've got people outside London, of course. Let's talk now to Alex Perry. Alex, you're a mortgage advisor at Orchard Financial Advisors.
Yes, so we're based in the Midlands, the West Midlands to be specific. We're a small firm of, I think it's under 10 brokers. And we work out of a little office in Wollaston. So we deal with everything. There's people here that do equity release. I deal with foreign nationals, buy-to-lets. If it's a mortgage, we'll be able to have a look at it for you.
Great. Well, Alex, it's lovely to have you with us today. Let's look at Jimmy Govan. Jimmy, you're from MPowered. You're National Sales Manager at MPowered Mortgages.
Morning, Jack. Yeah, National Sales Manager at MPowered Mortgages. I've been here 4 years now, and I've been in the intermediary industry for 20 years. Here at MPowered, what we're trying to do is fill a gap that maybe the high street are not doing. So we're a very fintech lender. We're looking at technology and how that can improve the broker journey and the customer journey.
Good. Well, good to have you with us today, Jimmy. Good to get that lender perspective. Obviously, a lot of people watching today will be brokers and intermediaries. We've got some brokers and intermediaries on the panel, but nice to hear how things sit from the lender perspective as well. Let's meet our final member of the panel, Kate Joseph, who's a mortgage broker from Illuminate Mortgages. Good morning, Kate.
Hi, Jack. How are you?
Wow, good to see you.
So yeah, Illuminate Mortgages. So I've been a mortgage broker for nearly 20 years now. And although the office is based in Swindon, Wiltshire, I'm on Zoom. I do everything over Zoom. So we look after clients all over the UK. And a bit like Alex, yeah, we just deal with all different types of clients. It's really quite varied, but including foreign nationals as well.
Good stuff. Well, look, lovely to have you with us, Kate. Thank you so much to everyone on the panel. And thank you if you're watching along with us. Now, remember, if you're watching us live, don't just be quiet. You can join in the discussion as well. If you want to ask a question to the panel, you can just use the comments function of your browser. You should see that comment whizzing its way to us, and we will, of course, deal with that as we can. So let's start off by defining who we mean by a foreign national, because it is a slightly slippery term, and there's kind of a sort of spectrum, isn't there, from a foreign national who's living here perhaps temporarily on a visa to maybe an EU citizen who's become settled here, or perhaps a foreigner who's got indefinite leave to remain, right up to someone who's decided they love the UK so much they want to become a UK citizen. So we've got many different people who are foreign nationals, if you use that term most broadly. But what does that mean in terms of lenders and their appetite for lending? Shall we kind of dive into that? Rachel, I think this might be one for you. In terms of the sorts of people that lenders are willing to provide finance for, what are the kind of general distinctions, would you say?
Okay, so your two main ones are they living in the UK or are they still overseas and buying an investment property or a property for family? So that's the first distinction to make. We're then digging into what else are they looking at with that client and what's going to be maybe more of a hurdle for them, and distinguishing that for them, because that can be different based on the country they come from. So whether they're Europe versus outside of Europe, even though we're no longer part of the EU, there are some separate rules with most lenders. And how they're going to treat things like income, loan to values, time in the UK, and so on, which I know we're going to cover.
Yeah. Okay. So generally speaking, then the kind of minimum threshold is that they are already here in the UK. A foreign national who is overseas and fancies getting a mortgage to buy a property in the UK, generally speaking, that's not going to work. But if it's someone who is here and they decided they want to buy a property here, that's where you can start having conversations about a mortgage. Yeah,
that's the main one where it comes to a foreign national. There is still a lender pool that will deal with clients that aren't going to live in the UK, but the main foreign national is a client that's living here, working here, and building a home here.
Yeah. Now, obviously, visas are usually granted initially for a certain period of time, aren't they? Can you give us a little bit of an idea about the sort of timescales that visas are granted for, and then how that marries up with lenders' criteria? How many years of residence does a lender typically want to see when they start considering an application?
Yeah, so every lender is different. First off, you probably look at the different visas that are there. So everything from tier 1 to tier 3. You've got working visas. You've also got spouses visas. There's a lot of different visas that are available first and foremost, and each of those visas potentially could have a different criteria with every different lender. The majority of them usually sit on a tier 1 to tier 2 visa, so it's a working visa. Some lenders have changed the barriers and have reduced it down to just 1 year in the UK potentially, but a lot of lenders as a norm will want at least 2 or 3 years in the UK or 2 or 3 years remaining on that visa.
Right. Yes. So there it needs to be a long-term residency that we're talking about here. Is the question how long have they been resident at the point of the application, or is it how much time they've got left on their visa? Which is the kind of more important?
Depends on the lender, and that's the thing. That's where it gets interesting for us as brokers, because each lender has a different stance. Some of them literally have a minimum requirement in the UK, and some of them they're more focused on the back end, what's remaining on that visa. And where there's some lenders where literally you'd have to apply right bang in the middle of their visa. So they've been here for half their visa and they've still got half the visa remaining for it to work. So that's where this becomes maybe a bit more of a complex conversation at times. It is actually very simple. It's just knowing your lender's criteria, and every lender's ruling on it is so different and forever changing.
And some lenders are both. So some want a minimum upfront and a minimum time remaining. So they want, like Rachel just said, sometimes you've got to time it to be smack bang in the middle of your visa, whatever sort of terms left on that.
Yes, I mean, it's an interesting one you raised there, Alex. In terms of the criteria other than the visa, what are the main differences? Because I know it's very hard to generalize because every lender will be different, but usually there are higher bars for foreign nationals to meet compared to a UK borrower, aren't they?
I think deposit in particular is the big stumbling block. A lot of lenders have a minimum 25% deposit needed. which is really huge if you consider that if you had indefinite leave to remain, it would only be a 5% deposit. So like Rachel and Alex were saying, it's really just important to use a broker who knows which lenders are actually going to be a lot more lenient with that deposit, you know, MPowered being one of them who's more sort of realistic with that.
Yeah, no, well, look, Kate's just teed you up beautifully there, Jimmy.
Yeah.
So, yes, I mean, MPowered, foreign nationals obviously are an important audience for you. Just give us the lender's perspective. What's MPowered's view on them? What criteria do you want from your foreign national borrowers?
Yeah, just to echo what they're saying there, you know, it is about deposit, it's about credit profile. I think, you know, a lot of the lenders will do a credit scoring, and if you've not been in the country so long, it becomes difficult to actually attain that credit rating. I think that's quite important. From an MPowered perspective, if somebody's been here 2 years, then we can look at 90%. So they'll only need to produce a 10% deposit. Right. And then kind of tying in with that, we will also accept foreign currency deposits. So again, if they're looking for a gifted deposit from mum and dad that are based abroad, we can accept that. As long as it's in a UK bank account prior to that. Now, if they've been in the country less than 2 years, we can still look at it, but we then would want a bigger deposit. So you're then looking at a 25% deposit if they've been in the country longer than 6 months, but less than 2 years.
Yeah. Okay. So we've got the time they've been resident at the moment of application. What about the kind of future piece, though? Because presumably you're also keen to know how long they're planning to stay here, right?
Yeah, and that's one of the biggest USPs for MPowered is that we don't need any time remaining on the visa. So again, we do a lot of business on this, and also we don't have any stipulations about how much they need to earn. So no, certain lenders will put in there that need to earn £100,000, etc., whereas we don't have any minimum thresholds from an income perspective.
Okay. Well, you've banged the drum very nicely for MPowered there. Rachel, this one for you. Let's just kind of zoom out a bit and look at the market more broadly. Does that reflect what you see from other lenders in terms of LTV, in terms of income requirements? How kind of common is that approach that MPowered has?
MPowered's approach is definitely unique. So there's a couple of lenders who have got better over time, or it was a USP for a long period of time. So Halifax were very good at it. Obviously, HSBC just did their reform of their foreign national policy. Lenders, I can see that there's a big volume of business to be done there. As a whole, though, it is still an area that's been quite neglected over time, considering how much of the population is from overseas. We need to be doing more as an industry to support these clients and them not always be penalised on deposit or earning a minimum income. If you take what the average income is in the UK, and a large portion of lenders have a minimum of 75,000 to 100,000 plus income as a household, or if not individually, that takes a massive pool of clientele out of the market straight away, and that's not maybe fair.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And you mentioned the size of the market there. I mean, the statistics are pretty impressive, actually. 16% of the UK population at the time of the last census, that was 21, were born overseas. That figure may well be higher now because we've had several years of net migration since then. So we're talking about, well, not far short of a fifth of the population being born overseas. Now, obviously, some of those people will have become citizens now. And from a mortgage lending perspective, if they have indefinite leave to remain, which is kind of all but a citizen, or they become a UK citizen, the distinction falls away. But nevertheless, we are still talking about many millions of customers who are still foreign nationals, but they want a mortgage here. So as you say, Rachel, it is crucial that we as an industry work out how to provide the finance these people need to make their dream of home ownership come true. Some of you have touched on the kind of practicalities of getting a mortgage from someone who was born overseas. I'm thinking in terms of the sort of documentation that they might have. Whilst a passport is usually pretty standard, wherever someone comes from in the world, the passport will usually have English on it. Other documents like a birth certificate or maybe an employment contract, if they're still employed by an overseas company, I don't know, deeds of a property they might own overseas, they could well be in a completely different language. How practical is it to use documents that are in another language as evidence in a mortgage application? Rachel, perhaps that's one for you.
Well, depending on the broker, we can't read those ourselves for our due diligence. So we need to make sure, especially for your money laundering checks and so on, that the most common one you'll see is bank statements, especially like Jimmy said, MPowered are great at this. They will take Bank of Mum and Dad deposits from overseas, which is great. A lot of lenders don't want to see deposits coming from overseas. However, if those bank statements are showing in the trail that it's come from overseas and they're not in English, they do need to be translated, because we'll have to do our DD, so will the solicitors for the money laundering, so they need to be done. So it's about being aware of your client's situation very early on, so you can get those translations done and keep them updated. And there is other documents as well. It could be tax returns is a really big one. So where clients are earning in different currencies and paying tax in different currencies, their tax returns could be another issue. And then, like you said, job employments, pay slips. Again, there's a lot of lenders that are quite good at taking alternative currencies into account. So they might be working here for a company, but they transferred over with that company and they're still getting shares paid or bonuses paid in dollars or euros and things like that. And we have to understand it.
Well, now that's an interesting point you raise, because let's assume, for the sake of argument, we've got a foreign-born professional who's here in the UK, but their salary is paid in their home currency. Obviously, in sterling terms, they will be earning different amounts each month, won't they, because of currency fluctuations. How does that work? Kate, do you want to go at that one? If your monthly income varies because of things completely outside your control, exchange rates, how does that suit lenders?
Well, I mean, that spooks them, because, you know, if the exchange rate is changing, then it's effectively like your earning power is almost less to pay for that mortgage. So, yes, it's a massive risk affordability wise when they're trying to calculate, well, how much can this person actually afford?
Yeah, right. So that's not a good start. I mean, let's say we've got someone who's in that position. Are there particular lenders you would point them towards? Are there things that you would recommend that they do just to kind of limit that risk and make themselves more attractive as a borrower?
So most lenders will have a haircut if they take overseas income into account. So they will use at point of application an exchange rate, but most lenders will take a haircut, whether it be 20% off the income or something like that, to allow for those fluctuations. So a lot of them will do that. So you might find that you're working on a lower income for that. So affordability can be affected. But most lenders that are taken into account overseas income will have some kind of haircut formula built in.
Yeah, it's normally a fixed amount. So they'd say if all of your income's sort of from overseas, it's a different currency, they might only accept 75% of your income or 60% of your income, something like that. Sort of, again, depending on where it's coming from as well.
Yeah.
And there's literally only like a handful of lenders really who do that from the high street at the moment, with international income.
Have things got better? I mean, it sounds like we've got some of the high street lenders, you know, accepting this is a large market and there is demand there, but it's still, you know, not universal. If you look back 5-10 years, has the picture improved? Is there more finance available for foreign nationals now than there was?
I think it might be more available, but obviously, as Rachel's been saying, there is quite a few more hoops to jump through. I think HSBC said they've reformed their foreign national policy, but again, that's with a minimum income for one applicant of 75,000. And if you look at what the average income is, yes, it's reformed, it's better than it was, but it's still not attainable for most people on one income. 75,000 isn't most people's sort of basic salary. But I think with a lot of lenders, Halifax, HSBC, if it's a couple, and this is important to mention, if it's a couple and one person in that couple has indefinite leave to remain, then it cancels out sometimes the sort of the foreign national. So they don't do as stringent checks as long as you put them as applicant one on the application. So I think it's better and it's improving, but I still don't think that it's sort of universally good.
Would you others agree with that? Is that a fair assessment, do you think, of how the direction of travel has been over the last decade or so?
I think it's getting better. Obviously, without causing too much controversial, Brexit was a big hit, because before that, anyone in Europe to an extent was treated like a UK national. So we did see a criteria shift happen quite drastically post-Brexit. I think now lenders' appetite is getting better. We are seeing more lenders coming into the market. What we're not seeing is them shout about it. So there is a lot of lenders that do quite interesting things for foreign nationals, but they don't make it their big USP that they're putting out to their broker world all the time. And then you'll have some lenders where they have a foreign national policy because they want to be in that search category. However, the chances of anyone ever being able to achieve it via the criteria is slim to nil. And as brokers, it's if you're going to offer a policy, make it achievable for clients and realistic, or just don't have one, because you don't need every lender doing everything. That's why you need a broker, is because a client needs a broker to go and find out what's best for them. We don't want every lender doing the same thing. But some lenders are getting better. Some lenders are trying to figure out how to do it well. But you still got this, probably the stigma of the lenders that offer it but don't actually want to do it. And that then causes the hurdles for brokers, because they come through on your sourcing, they come through on all your search mechanisms and so on. But then 2 questions in, they fail the criteria check.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Do you think that that there's a mismatch then between lenders' attitudes to this client base and brokers' kind of perception of it? Because it sounds like things have been improving, but Rachel, you were saying that maybe a lot of lenders have not been, making a big show of it, and it could be that brokers don't realise just how many options there are now. Is that fair?
Yeah, like if you take the brokerage world, how much has changed? If you just take the last 6 months, never mind the last 12 months, 3 years, just on rates and criterias and everything, our world is evolving all the time. And if you don't come across foreign nationals on a day-to-day basis, it is like anything new. You are going to be a little bit more conscious of, are you the right person to do it from a broker's point of view? Are you going to pass it to somebody else who's a specialist versus understand? Because as we've all been told, there's been 4 of us talking today, we're going how every lender's got a different criteria, whether it's just on the loan to value, never mind on all the other things you've got to take into account for an application. So it is looking at, if you don't do it every day, how much time you have to spend to learn that area versus passing it out. And it's like everything in the industry, it's the education. Where does a broker go to find this information to then be able to help their client? Because it's not going to be trained anywhere. So a broker's got to go. We work with over 90 lenders. You've got to go look at 90 different lenders' criteria to find out their foreign national policy. Well, you're not going to get any business written.
Yeah.
And also on that as well, if you sometimes I've recently come across a visa that I've not come across before. Like we said earlier, the main ones are sort of tier 1, 2, 3. I came across a visa it's called like a family visa. I've not come across that before. It doesn't fall into the tiers. And when I was searching for that client, sometimes I was speaking to lenders and they'd never heard of it either. And they were all a bit like, oh, what's that about? And in the end, we ended up having to get a bit more documentation on it, sort of a Home Office letter and that sort of stuff. But I think because it's not widely done and it's not, like you say, the lenders aren't sort of shouting about their policies and the fine details of them, that it becomes even harder as a broker to get something in and know specifically who's going to take that, especially if it's something that you've not come across before.
It might be worth just recapping some of the visa types that there are, because we've been talking a little bit about this, and it could be there are people who are watching who are just scratching their heads. So here's a little bit of a reminder. This is from the MPowered website. So the tier 1 visa, we've talked about that quite a lot. That, I suppose, is the easiest one to use in terms of mortgage eligibility. That's often known as an entrepreneurship or investor visa. It's for people who've come to the UK to start a business or invest in an existing one. Now, you can't apply for a tier 1 visa now, but of course there are people who are living here who came with a tier 1 visa. So they're generally seen as being quite attractive. Tier 2 visas, well, we've talked about that as being quite similar. These are what we are sometimes called skilled worker visas. So in practical terms, very similar to tier 1s. But lenders will often ask additional questions like how long has the applicant lived in the UK? What's their employment history? That kind of thing. That's where the devil is in the detail, if you like. And then there are other types, spousal visas. So this is someone who is married to a UK national and is living here because of that. So you've got those different types of visas. One thing that I would like to quiz you guys on is EU citizens. Of course, we mentioned the change since Brexit. Before Brexit, EU citizens could live in the UK effectively with all the same rights and privileges as a UK citizen. Since Brexit, they've been given the option to stay here, but they had to apply for settled status. And the official government stats show that something like 3.9 million people have been granted settled status, so lots of them out there. But in mortgage terms, what does settled status mean? Is it kind of closer to the indefinite leave to remain kind of gold standard, or is it lower down, more like those other visas we've just been discussing?
And yeah, you get basically treated like you've got indefinite leave to remain if you've got settled status. So then that would fall under the standard lending policy, where most lenders will do like the 5% deposit. It's when you have the pre-settled status that, again, the lender's criteria can differ greatly about what they want, particularly in terms of deposit. And if you're a broker that's not used to working with that particular client base, or you're not in a particularly multicultural area, that's where brokers can make mistakes and clients can be told they can't get a mortgage or be given wrong information. So yeah, it's really just important to use a broker that knows, because they'll know off the top of their head, oh, these are the lenders I can use for that, even without looking it up.
Do you, and this is a question really for the brokers, but do you find yourself going to the same half a dozen lenders when you've got a foreign national customer? You just think, I know these lenders will do it in principle. It's just a question of fine tuning the application. Or do you look more broadly each time? What's your approach?
I think it depends on the client. I think it depends on the client and the rates and things like that. Sometimes it's worth your time and effort to go and redo the research, because it's changing all the time. I know that Nottingham have just changed their policies. Yeah. Like it's changing so frequently that every case that comes across your desk that's a foreign national would really need looking individually, because if you're going to just put them somewhere is going to do it, is that necessarily going to be the right thing?
You need to check it's the best rate, don't you? You can't just go, oh, this lender does it, I'll put it with them. You've got to go through the motions of starting from the top of the list, which one's going all the way down. But yeah, things are changing all the time in relation to it. So it certainly keeps us on our toes.
And the foreign national barrier is just an extra hurdle. These clients will probably still need a potential higher income multiple. They may have self-employed, where we need to take latest year into account versus average of that. They may have adverse credit, loan, debt to income ratios, all these things. So everything you've got to do in a normal application, you still have to do for this client. You just add in another tier of things you've got to take into consideration. And it's having that conversation. That's where it's probably the most simplest thing for the broker to do, is take the time to have the conversation regarding all of this in that initial call, and finding out those things that could be potential hurdles down the line, i.e., where is the deposit held, and is it in their account overseas or somebody else's account? All these different things, so that when you are signing your research with a lender, you're fully armed with the information like you would be with anything else. It's just knowing those. We would ask a client if they're getting deposit from parents in the UK and the UK resident, are their parents in the UK? Because their parents might have actually moved abroad and retired overseas. It's just knowing that extra information so you can do your research.
Let's bring Jimmy in here if we can to get a kind of lender perspective on that, because really what you guys have described there is different layers of risk, really, isn't it? Is, where is the family? How long has the person been in the UK? Where is their main source of income? Generally speaking, Jimmy, foreign nationals, do you see them as being more risky than a UK citizen because they've not been here very long? What is it kind of sets alarm bells ringing from a lender perspective in terms of risk and your attitude?
Yeah, so there's a couple of points here, really. The longevity of how long are they going to be here? I think, when I can understand why certain lenders will have a length of time left on the visa. If they've not settled here, they may not settle here. They may want to go back to where they've come from. So there could be a risk element there. Hence why there's a higher deposit. I think what we've seen since the healthcare visas come in, and it's a real good point that they make, is that the earned income on the healthcare visa, the average is nowhere near the 75,000, but you're seeing year on year people coming on the healthcare visa post-Brexit. And I think it's really important that a lot of the high street lenders start to take this into consideration, because there's a real big unreserved area there that's underserved by sort of a lot of the high street. So it'll be interesting to see, with the changes from the Nottingham and HSBC moving in a positive manner, how many more lenders follow suit in the next 12 to 18 months, because this area is not going away. You know, it's going to grow, continue to grow and continue to grow. So yeah, from a lender perspective, I get the risk versus the reward, but there's something that needs to be done to sort of look after these clients.
Well, a couple of things there. I mean, the size of the market is growing. I mean, we talked about 16% of the UK population were foreign born at the time of the last census. That figure may well have grown since then, because we've had several years of quite high net migration. In terms of the kind of push side of it, the industry's willingness to lend, we have seen some fairly high profile announcements from lenders like HSB saying they're introducing a bit more parity in their attitude between their attitude to UK citizens versus foreign nationals. So do you think that combination of increasing demand from a bigger pool of customers and, you know, big names, high street names showing more willingness will give the industry the impetus it needs to raise its game?
Yeah, 100%. You know, I think it's small steps at the moment, but there's always lenders looking at criteria. I think Rachel alluded to it. You know, the last 6 months, if you look at the amount of criteria that's changed from every end, take the British National Overseas Visa. You know, that wasn't a popular visa if you went back 2, 3, 4 years ago, but now we're seeing a lot more applications coming in on that British National Overseas. So again, understanding your visa types. You know, I've seen one recently with the refugee status, which I've not seen before. And again, there's more and more visas coming in there, and the government's issuing different styles of visas. So we've just got to be aware as brokers to just make sure you're doing your research and just keeping on top of what lenders are doing.
Here's a little bit of a joker in the pack question for you. I am hearing that there's a lot of Americans who are so distraught at the victory of Donald Trump in the US presidential election that they just want to get out of America. We did actually, we laugh here, but we did actually see a bit of that when Trump won back in 2016. There was a move of Americans to Canada and other countries, just they didn't want to live in America. There was a lot of kind of people talked about it, and not many people actually did, but there was a definite trend there, and we are seeing similar sorts of things being said now. Let's just be clear though, if there are kind of desperate Democrats in America who just can't bear the prospect of living in Trump 2.0, how easy would it be for someone like that to apply for a mortgage in the UK and buy a property here?
It's doable. It depends what the work situation is going to be. So there's a lot of clients from America that still buy here, whether it is a holiday home, or a lot of American children come to study here. So they will do at least one semester, if not the whole university in the UK. But also look, like we're based in the city, look at Canary Wharf and places like that. A lot of our companies here have their main HQs in America too. So there is always this crossover of people coming over here for a set period of years on contracts anyway. So it's still feasible. It's again, understanding their situation. What are they going to do?
Yes. So you're not necessarily bracing for thousands of applications from American.
An influx of Americans.
Hey, that won't be too bad.
Yeah. Okay. Well, good to know that there is a route there, but it sounds like they're going to need a connection, an employment connection perhaps already. They can't just sort of, decide that I don't want to live in Trump's America, I'm off, and buy a mortgage just like that. Obviously, we talk about London's property market being very international, but when we see those kind of mega rich enclaves of oligarchs, a lot of those guys who don't live in the UK, they're just paying cash, aren't they?
A large portion of it is cash. We still have a lot of clients that will take a mortgage out because it is more maybe tax efficient for them, depending what countries they're in and so on, and where their money's held, because obviously saving rates have gone up over the last few years with mortgage rates going up. There's still homes for them, but predominantly the last few years has been a heavier cash purchase market for that higher end of the market.
Okay, so you're not going to be writing lots of mortgages for Chelsea and Kensington with American mortgages just yet, you don't think?
I would like to, but I don't think it's easy.
Well, if any rich Americans are watching, we'll make sure we give them your email, Rachel.
Perfect.
Okay. All right. Well, we've covered off lots of topics there about this one. It is a, I think, a rather underserved market by the sounds of it. I mean, it's a large market, and I think we have identified that there is a little bit of a mismatch between the amount of lenders offering finance for foreign nationals and brokers' knowledge, perhaps. And certainly the fact that the market is changing and we are seeing more lenders addressing this market means perhaps that brokers perhaps got a bit of homework to do to understand just how many options there are now. Because if their aim is to find the right finance for a foreign national who wants to buy here in the UK, well, there are more options out there. I think a couple of takeaways, though. The key thing is to establish exactly what the person's status is, so what visa they have, and then it's knowing the kind of signs to look for in terms of numbers of years they've been resident in the UK already, but also looking forward, because it sounds like it varies a lot from lender to lender. What's more important? Is it the future, or is it the past, or is it a combination of the two? Would you say that's a fair sort of summary?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
But look, you guys are obviously all engaged in providing finance for foreign buyers, and while the criteria might be different, some things really are international and cross borders, and that is the dream of owning a home. And for many people who've chosen to make the UK their home, they want to own that home ownership dream as well. And so mortgages have a key part to play there. Okay, so we've come to the final few minutes of our session today, and this is where we do announce our Star Broker of the Week. So can I have a drum roll, please? I have got the name of the winner. For those of you who don't watch as regularly as you should, the Star Broker of the Week is a broker from the broker community who has gone over and above, whether that is putting extra hours in, being that more rigorous in their search for the right lender, whatever it might be, something that sets them apart for service. And today's winner is Matthew Farr from Hudson Roads. So congratulations, Matthew. Let's just tell you what it says on Matthew's citation here. It says, congratulations, Matthew. He pulled off an impressive remortgage under some serious time pressure. His client couldn't speak highly enough of his knowledge, efficiency, and dedication. Matthew even checked in during his holiday to make sure that everything was going to plan, everything was on track. So congratulations to Matthew. Well done for all the hard work. So that's Matthew Farr. Congratulations. Today is your moment in the sun. Anyone watching who would like to nominate a star broker for a future episode of Mortgage News Live, please get in touch with the team at MPowered. You can see the LinkedIn details on the side of this chat. Do get in touch with your nominations. We're always keen to hear some of the great things that people in the broker community are doing. But I think that's us almost done for today. So it just remains for me to say thank you very much indeed for your company today. Lovely to have you with us. Do join us again in 2 weeks' time when we'll tackle another big, tricky issue from the world of Mortgage News Live.